Snow fell softly over the highland forest, covering the ancient ground in a pale, silent blanket. The trees stood tall and dark, their branches heavy with frost, as if guarding secrets buried deep beneath the frozen soil. The forest had witnessed centuries of war, betrayal, and forgotten promises. Tonight, it would witness another fate being rewritten. She lay unconscious among the snow and fallen leaves, her dark hair spread like ink against the white ground. Her breath was shallow, almost invisible in the cold air. The thin cloak wrapped around her body was torn and soaked, offering little protection from the biting winter. If help did not come soon, the forest would claim her life as it had claimed so many others. The sound of hooves broke the silence. A lone rider emerged between the trees, moving carefully along the narrow path. He wore a long, dark coat trimmed with fur, and his posture spoke of authority and discipline. This was Alistair McRae, the Duke of the Highlands, a man feared by enemies and respected by his people. His face, hardened by years of battle and leadership, showed little emotion, until his horse suddenly stopped. Alistair followed the animal's gaze and saw her. He dismounted immediately, boots crunching against the snow as he approached the motionless figure. At first glance, he thought she was dead, but then he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest. Kneeling beside her, he removed his gloves and touched her cheek. Ice cold, too cold. She's alive, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He had no idea who she was or how she had ended up here, miles away from the nearest village. The Highlands were unforgiving, especially in winter. No one survived long without shelter. Alistair hesitated only for a moment. A duke was not supposed to involve himself in the troubles of strangers, especially not on a night when tensions between clans were already dangerously high. But something about her, perhaps the quiet strength in her face, even in unconsciousness, made him act. He lifted her carefully into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, yet there was a firmness to her body that suggested resilience rather than weakness. He wrapped his own cloak around her before placing her on his horse and mounting behind her, holding her steady as they rode toward his estate. The journey back felt longer than usual. The wind howled louder, and the snow thickened, as if the forest itself resisted letting her go. Alistair urged the horse forward, his jaw clenched with determination. When they finally reached the stone walls of Dunrath Castle, torches flared to life. Servants rushed forward, shock evident on their faces at the sight of their duke carrying an unconscious woman. "Prepare a room near the hearth," Alistair ordered, "and fetch the healer." Now, they obeyed without question. Inside the castle, warmth slowly replaced the cold. The woman was laid on a bed near a roaring fire. The healer, an elderly woman named Moira, examined her carefully. "She's been exposed to the cold for hours," Moira said. "Another hour, and you would have been too late." Alistair exhaled quietly, a tension he hadn't realized he was holding easing slightly. As the servants worked to warm her and change her clothes, Alistair stood near the door, watching. He should have left. He had council meetings to attend, political enemies to outmaneuver. Yet he stayed. When Moira finished, she turned to him. "She will live, my lord, but when she wakes, her past may not be so easily healed." Alistair nodded, though her words unsettled him. Hours passed. The castle slept. Alistair remained awake. Just before dawn, her fingers twitched. He stepped closer as her eyes slowly opened, dark and alert despite her weakness. Panic flashed across her face when she realized she was no longer in the forest. "Easy," Alistair said calmly. "You're safe." She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. He gently stopped her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse yet firm. "My name is Alistair McRae," he replied. "You are in my castle. I found you in the forest." Her eyes widened. Recognition, or fear, he couldn't tell which. "The Highlands," she whispered. "Then I didn't make it far enough." "What were you running from?" Alistair asked. She looked away, her jaw tightening. "Men who won't stop until they find me." The honesty in her voice struck him. This was no ordinary traveler. Trouble followed her like a shadow. "You're safe here," he said again, though this time the words felt heavier. Protection came with consequences. She studied him closely, as if measuring his truth. Finally, she nodded slightly. "My name is Alara," she said, "and I owe you my life." Alistair didn't respond immediately. Outside, the sun began to rise over the highlands, casting pale light through the narrow windows. A rescue in the forest was never just a rescue. The highlands did nothing without purpose. He had saved her from death, but in doing so, he had unknowingly invited a storm into his carefully guarded world. And the forest, silent once more, kept the rest of her secrets hidden, for now. Alara awoke to the sound of crackling fire and the faint scent of pine smoke. For a moment, she did not move. Years of running had taught her that waking too quickly could mean death. She listened instead, to the steady rhythm of the castle, to the distant echo of footsteps, to the wind pressing against stone walls far thicker than any shelter she had known. This place was strong, ancient, protected. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The room was large but simple, lit by firelight and the pale glow of morning creeping through narrow windows. Heavy wool blankets covered her body, warm and unfamiliar. Her clothes were gone, replaced by a soft linen gown. Instinctively, she reached beneath the pillow. Nothing. Her breath caught. The door opened quietly, and Alistair McCrae stepped inside. He carried a tray of food and stopped when he saw her sitting upright, tension evident in every line of her body. "You heal quickly," he said evenly. "Where are my things?" Alara asked, her voice sharp. "In safe keeping," Alistair replied, "including the knife you hid beneath your cloak." Her eyes flickered. Few had noticed that blade before it was already drawn. "You're observant," she said. "I have to be," he answered, placing the tray on a table near the fire. "Eat. You'll need strength." She did not move. Alistair studied her carefully. Now that color had returned to her face, he could see the marks of hardship, faint scars on her hands, the guarded way she held her shoulders, the alertness of someone who had learned to survive alone. "You said men were hunting you," he continued. "Who are they?" Alara looked at the window, then back at him. "If I tell you, your castle becomes a target." "It already is," Alistair said. "I rule these lands. Enemies do not need excuses." Silence stretched between them. Finally, she spoke. "They belong to House Brenwick." The name landed heavily. Alistair's jaw tightened. House Brenwick was powerful, ruthless, and dangerously close to the crown. Any conflict with them risked open war. "And why would Brenwick want you?" he asked. Alara lowered her gaze. "Because I know something they buried." Alistair did not press further. He had learned long ago that forcing truth only drove it deeper into shadows. "You will remain here," he said, "at least until you are strong enough to travel." "And after that?" she asked quietly. "That depends on how far they're willing to go." Days passed. Alara recovered quickly, but peace did not come easily. She explored the castle cautiously, always aware of guards, always measuring exits. Servants whispered about the mysterious woman the Duke had brought back from the forest. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. Alistair watched her from a distance. He saw how she avoided mirrors, how she stood near walls, how her hand instinctively moved to where her knife should have been whenever voices rose too suddenly. This was not fear. It was preparation. One afternoon, Alistair summoned her to the outer courtyard. The sky was clear, but the air remained sharp with winter. "I want to see how you fight," he said. Alara arched an eyebrow. "You assume I can." He gestured to a rack of wooden practice weapons. "Pick one." She chose a short sword without hesitation. Alistair removed his coat and selected a longer blade. The guards nearby stiffened, uncertain whether to intervene. "First strike is yours," he said. Alara did not hesitate. She moved fast, faster than expected, her blade slicing through the air with precision. Alistair barely blocked in time. The force surprised him. She was not trained like a noble knight, but her movements were efficient, deadly, stripped of ceremony. They circled each other. "You fight like someone who's had no one to protect her," Alistair said. "And you fight like someone who's never had the luxury of losing." Ilara replied. Their blades clashed again and again. Neither held back. Finally, Alistair disarmed her with a sharp twist. Her sword hit the ground. Before he could speak, she reached behind his knee and knocked him off balance, sending him crashing into the snow. Laughter burst from the watching guards before they could stop themselves. Ilara stepped back, breathing hard. You left yourself open. Alistair lay there for a moment, then laughed as well. So I did. From that day forward, something shifted. They spoke more. About the land. About the people. About survival. Ilara never revealed her full story, but pieces slipped through the cracks. She had grown up near the border. Her family had been erased quietly, efficiently. She had learned to read maps before books, shadows before faces. One night, horns sounded from the watchtowers. Riders approached. Alistair was already armored when Ilara reached the battlements. They're here, she said. How many? He asked. Enough. Brynwick banners fluttered in the torchlight below. A messenger rode forward, calling for the Duke of the Highlands. Alistair descended to meet them. Ilara followed despite his attempt to stop her. The Brynwick envoy smiled thinly. We seek a woman, he said. A fugitive. Dangerous. She fled into your lands. You accuse my guest of crimes without proof, Alistair replied coldly. She carries proof, the envoy said. Something that belongs to us. Ilara stepped forward. Gasps rippled through the Brynwick ranks. You burned villages to hide a treaty you were never meant to sign, she said clearly. I have the original seal. And witnesses. The envoy's smile vanished. Alistair turned to her slowly. You said you knew something. I said enough, Ilara replied. Steel rang as swords were drawn. Alistair raised his hand. You will leave, he told the envoy. Now, or you will be treated as invaders. The Brynwick riders withdrew, but not before the envoy spoke again. This is not over, he warned. As the gates closed, silence followed. Alistair faced Ilara. You've declared war. I've already been living in one, she said. You just stepped into it with me. He studied her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. Then we face it together, he said. Outside the walls, the forest stirred once more, waiting, watching, ready. War did not arrive with thunder. It crept in quietly, like frost spreading across stone. In the days following the Brynwick envoy's retreat, the Highlands grew tense. Scouts reported unusual movement along the eastern borders. Supply routes were disrupted. Messengers vanished without trace. It was a strategy Alistair knew well, pressure before bloodshed. Ilara felt it too. She slept lightly, often waking before dawn with her hand clenched around an invisible blade. The castle felt safe, but safety was a fragile thing when hunted by powerful men. One morning, Alistair called a private council. Maps covered the long oak table, weighed down with daggers and stones marking troop movements. They will not attack the castle directly, Alistair said. Not yet. Brynwick prefers to starve an enemy before striking. Ilara traced a path along the map with her finger. Here, she said, this pass. They'll use it to cut off the southern villages. Alistair looked at her sharply. How do you know? Because that's where they destroyed my home, she replied. Same terrain, same silence. The room fell quiet. That night, Alistair rode out with a small force, leaving Ilara behind under heavy guard. She hated it. Waiting had always been more dangerous than fighting. When he returned 2 days later, his armor was scarred and his eyes darker. You were right, he said simply. They stood together on the battlements, watching smoke rise faintly on the horizon. This ends with me, Ilara said. Brynwick wants what I carry. She removed a small leather pouch from beneath her tunic and opened it. Inside was a broken seal, ancient, unmistakable. Alistair exhaled slowly. This could bring down houses. It already has, she said. Plans were made. Messengers sent. Allies summoned. But Brynwick moved faster. On the 7th night, the castle was breached, not by army, but by fire. Flaming arrows streaked across the sky, slamming into the outer courtyards. Screams echoed. Bells rang. Ilara! Alistair shouted as chaos erupted. She was already moving. She armed herself with steel this time, not wood. The blade felt right in her hand. Familiar. They fought side by side through smoke and shadow. Brenwick's soldiers poured in through a hidden sally port betrayed by gold. The clash was brutal, close, personal. At the gatehouse, Alara was knocked to the ground. A Brenwick captain loomed over her, sword raised. "You should have stayed buried," he sneered. Before he could strike, Alistair drove his blade through the man's chest. Alara stared up at him, breathless. "You came back." "I always do," he said, pulling her to her feet. By dawn, the castle still stood, but at a cost. Bodies lined the courtyard. The wounded groaned. Victory tasted like ash. In the aftermath, Alistair made a choice that would echo beyond the Highlands. He sent word to the crown. He attached the seal. Brenwick's lies would be exposed to the realm. "They'll come for you harder now," Alaris said quietly. "They'll have to go through me first," Alistair replied. That night, the weight between them shifted. No longer rescue and debt. Now his loyalty. In the quiet of the great hall, Alara finally told him everything. About the treaty, the villages erased, the names of the dead she carried like prayers. When she finished, Alistair said nothing. He only placed his hand over hers. "You are not alone anymore," he said. Outside, the Highland forest stood dark and patient. The final reckoning was coming. Dawn broke over the Highlands with a pale, uncertain light, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise after the bloodshed of the night before. Smoke still curled from the damaged towers of Dunrath Castle, drifting into the cold morning air. The forest beyond the walls remained silent, holding its breath. Alara stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching servants and soldiers move among the fallen. Every face she passed carried exhaustion, grief, or quiet determination. Where it finally shed its disguise. Alistair joined her, his armor replaced by a dark wool coat, his sword still at his side. He looked older than he had days before, the weight of command etched deeply into his features. "The crown received the message at first light," he said. "They cannot ignore the seal." "They'll try," Alara replied. "Men like Brenwick always do." Not this time. Before either of them could speak again, a horn sounded from the watchtower. Riders approached, bearing royal colors. The tension was immediate. Guards tightened their grips. Alistair straightened, his presence commanding silence. The royal delegation entered the castle before noon. At its head was Lord Heron, the king's justice envoy, flanked by armed escort. "Alara of the Borderlands," Heron said, after the formalities. "You stand accused by House Brenwick of treason." Alara stepped forward without fear. "And I accuse House Brenwick of genocide and conspiracy against the crown." Gasps rippled through the hall. She presented the seal. Witnesses followed, survivors long hidden, brought under Alistair's protection. Each voice added weight. Each truth another crack in Brenwick's walls. By sunset, judgment was passed. House Brenwick was stripped of titles. Arrest warrants were issued. Their lands seized pending trial. Justice, slow and scarred, had arrived. That night, the castle was quieter than it had been in weeks. Alara stood once more at the forest's edge, the place where her life had nearly ended. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and forgiving. "You could leave now," Alistair said beside her. "No one would stop you." She looked at him, truly looked at him. "And go where?" "The world is wide. So is this land," she replied. "And it still needs protecting." He smiled faintly. "It does." Months passed. The Highlands healed. Villages were rebuilt. Truth replaced fear. Alara became more than a guest. She trained soldiers, advised councils, spoke for those who had been silenced. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Alistair took her hand. "I found you dying in a forest," he said, "and you saved my people." "You saved me first," she answered. The forest whispered in the distance, no longer a place of fear, but of beginnings. And a legend spread across the realm.